Frederick Williams Medical Sciences Complex. His condition is said to be serious. Up to 8 a.m., crime scene investigators were still on the scene with at least a dozen spent shells being observed by investigators. Police currently have no motive for the shooting. In a separate incident, police said a 17-year-old teenager was among 3 others who were shot Tuesday night in Pleasantville. The victims, ages 17, 18, and 19, were lying along Cartelia Drive around 8:20 p.m. when they were confronted by a man known to them. The suspect had been observed jumping a nearby wall before running up to the trio. Without warning, he opened fire on the group. Police said the 18-year-old was shot in the right butt cheek, the 17-year-old was shot in the upper left leg, and the 19-year-old was shot in his lower left leg. The suspect then fled the scene on foot. Relatives in the area notified the police and emergency health services, and the injured teenagers were all taken to the San Fernando General Hospital. A team of officers from the Monterey Post Police Station responded and are continuing inquiries. Caribbean Airlines confirmed that a bomb threat was received at its Trinidad call center on September 1st, but the threat was not directed at the airline itself. The threat involved the Chedi Jagan International Airport in Guyana, where a man claimed a life and death situation could occur. Guyanese authorities are investigating, tracing the call back to Guyana. The caller, who said he was once part of a group planning the incident, warned the authorities but refused to provide further details. This comes shortly after a similar threat was made against a Georgetown hotel, which was later deemed a prank. Internationally, a U.S. Navy sailor has been detained in Venezuela after traveling there without authorization, according to the Pentagon. The sailor was taken into custody by Venezuelan authorities around August 30th. Pentagon officials say they are working closely with the State Department to resolve the situation. The sailor was not on official duty or authorized leave at the time of the incident. This follows a similar case earlier this year involving a U.S. Army soldier detained in Russia. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi McNish. Thanks for watching.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
WESN.
Hello Trinidad and Tobago, welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. Thank you very much for joining me this morning. Forgive me if I sound a bit odd or a bit more like Donald Duck. Unfortunately, I think I've gotten the Saharan dust. I think that's what it is. I don't know. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining me this morning on the program. Thanks for being with us. Lots to talk about as we get into some conversations. Some concerning news, actually. Whether it is surprising news to many of our viewers, we'll have that debate later on. But a United Nations report was released on September 2nd. It was entitled, or is entitled rather, Caribbean Gangs, Drugs, Firearms and Gang Networks in Jamaica, St. Lucia, Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago. And the report actually goes into a lot of details in respect to how gangs are operating in Trinidad and Tobago as a whole. So just criminal gangs as a whole. However, the report also detailed how Venezuelan gangs are now clashing with local gangs. And whilst that is not something that one would necessarily be too concerned about gangs clashing with gangs. Gang warfare is nothing that is necessarily new to Trinidad and Tobago. What is even more concerning, what is even more alarming, is the continued rise in transnational organized crime and the mere fact that other criminal networks are finding haven in TNT. Well, to get into a deeper conversation, a wider conversation, I'm joined by human rights advocate Denise Pitcher. She joins me this morning virtually. That's okay, I'm virtually as well. Good morning, Miss Pitcher. How are you?
Good morning, Keaton. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you very much for joining me on the program this morning. So, as I mentioned, it's rather a damning report. It's extremely alarming, to have this verified report of the past of the United Nations, really stating the situation we find ourselves in respect to criminal gang organizations and networks. What is even more concerning is the continued rise in transnational organized crime, particularly with that of Venezuelan gangs. This report doesn't necessarily overwhelm the TNT, but in respect to its efforts to allow migrants to continue entering our shores, how does this speak to the role and the efforts on the part of authorities in a humanitarian aid, but also in a national security sense?
So, yes, the report is very detailed. It's actually a very, very good report. And I do encourage everyone to have a look at this report because there's a lot of information, very useful information, and also it's very useful to the government officials and policyholders. With regards to migrants, now they did talk about one particular gang who has been involved in Trinidad and Tobago for years. It's not a new situation. It has been ongoing even before this influx of Venezuelan migrants and refugees in Trinidad and Tobago. And the fact is that our proximity to Venezuela and South America, we've always been a transit point. Long before this influx, the humanitarian crisis in Venezuela. It is also reasonable to expect that in every migration movement, there will be some criminal elements that will arrive with the influx. However, when you look at the reports, most of the criminal activity, they describe as happening with local gangs. It is, of course, it would be concerning to the average citizen, that we're seeing, elements of Venezuelan gangs in Trinidad and Tobago. However, the vast majority of Venezuelans who are detained by authorities are usually detained for illegal entry. And that's simply because our Immigration Act does not have provisions to treat with migrants and refugees and the current context of migration. So when you look at the data, when you look at the facts, and you look at the numbers of persons that are detained, it's usually illegal entry. Yes, persons do get arrested for crime, and that will take place regardless. But in terms of the numbers, again, I would say, it is concerning, yes, but I don't think we should paint all migrants with a broad brush in terms of, just a few bad apples.
Well, as I understand what you're suggesting, at the same time, if I look at the report, it states that Trinidad and Tobago has actually taken in approximately 60,000 Venezuelans since 2015. The report suggests that TNT has the highest number of Venezuelan migrants in the world, considering those numbers. The number of legally registered Venezuelan migrants is 16,523. So, though you are making an argument that not all Venezuelan migrants, just as not all Trinbago citizens are bad, I understand that, I recognize that, but this entire process of being able to screen those who are entering Trinidad and Tobago, surely a lot more needs to be done in that regard.
Yes, and that's a very important point, and this is why it's so important for us to have some sort of refugee policy or refugee law in place, because yes, we're having, several, thousand people coming in Trinidad and Tobago, and again, given Trinidad and Tobago is a small country, and even yes, we're welcoming the highest number per capita in the world. So it is a lot for a small country. But this is where a refugee policy or a refugee law would mitigate against these, these concerns, because if you have some sort of system in place to screen persons, then you can legally deport persons who do not meet the criteria to be considered a refugee. Of course, there are persons that want to migrate to Trinidad and Tobago for economic opportunity. And of course, if you have provisions in place for them to take advantage of those opportunities as well through law, again, that would be ideal for our national security. But right now, we don't have any law. And as a consequence of that, we don't have any screening mechanisms, nothing at the border, to assess persons as they're coming in. And that is the problem. So if we have some sort of assessment, devised in a refugee policy or a refugee law, we could legally deport persons. But that system does not exist at this point in time.
But does a law or a policy at this point really matter? Though to a certain extent, it's a reactive measure to the situation we find ourselves in. Does it really matter if other laws can't be enforced or if the necessary resources aren't in place? The report spoke to Citrus, Icarcus, and Moruga, being hubs, of course, of Venezuelan migrants entering TNT in large numbers, but also points for trafficking, whether it be human trafficking or the trafficking of drugs and firearms. That speaks to really open, porous borders, Coast Guard not having the necessary resources or being able to intercept these points. So even if the law or the policy exists, surely it wouldn't make much of a difference. If it is, it can't be applied effectively.
Yes, and that's a very, very important point, because you can have laws in place, you can establish new courts for trafficking, but if you do not have these systems in place, these structures in place to enforce the laws are of limited value. And this is not a new situation. Yes, the influx exploded maybe in 2017. And the issue of human trafficking, the issue of drugs, immigration has gone on for several years before that. And before this influx, the government clearly still struggled to deal with the problem, and it's only exploded since then. And as a consequence of that, we have to look at the fact that what is the government doing, and what systems are in place to deal with trafficking, to deal with drugs, and the systems and structures are not in place, number one. And another very important point, which the report also details, is the complicity of government officials, state officials, police, immigration officials, Coast Guard, all being involved in these illegal activities. And we've only had 2 persons convicted to date of human trafficking, and the human trafficking situation in Trinidad and Tobago, it's an extremely large issue. The report talks about 4,000 persons being trafficked over maybe I think a 5-year period. That's an astounding number for a small country like Trinidad and Tobago. So this is an ongoing problem that has not been addressed. And there are a number of factors that it's not just only that we have large numbers in place, but we do not have systems, we do not have enforcement of the existing laws.
So in that regard, would you, based off of the numbers that you just suggested from what the report has detailed, 4,000 human trafficking cases in how many years? Would you describe Trinidad and Tobago? We've long described Trinidad and Tobago as a transshipment point for arms, ammunition, and for drugs. Are we now a hub for human trafficking? So would human traffickers find TNT favorable?
Can you repeat the last part?
Would human traffickers find TNT favorable?
Would human traffickers find Trinidad and Tobago what?
Favorable, the environment that
yeah. Absolutely. The thing is, when you have, members of state services, the police, immigration officials, Coast Guard, all part of this these operations where they're able to facilitate and provide cover for traffickers. Yes, we're a very hospitable place in terms of human trafficking and drug trafficking, weapons trafficking, all of those things which are contributing to crime. And this is where the government of Trinidad and Tobago needs to take measures to enforce the laws better. There have been a number of initiatives with limited effect. So it appears right now what they're employing is not necessarily working. So this report is a stark reminder of that we're not doing enough. Trinidad and Tobago is not doing enough. And it goes back to our to institutions, weak institutions, and weak policies, weak enforcement of policies and laws.
Is there any concern though that Trinbagonians might start taking this situation into their own hands? I mean, in the last few years, we've seen now and again of situations where there's been vigilante justice. Already, many Trinbagonians seem to have a standoffish attitude when it comes to Venezuelan migrants or Spanish-speaking migrants on a whole. Do you think that this could only increase the possibility of xenophobia or increasing that standoff approach even further?
Definitely these, so people act based on fear, right? And if certain narratives are being peddled, not necessarily with detailed facts, people are, we have a situation in Trinidad and Tobago where the economy is already in bad shape, crime is rising, and now, if it is people are seeing, foreigners are coming in, they're likely to conclude that, okay, this is a problem for us. However, I would go back to the fact that, most migrants are here because they want a better life for themselves and for their family. And you see a lot of the persons that come to Trinidad and Tobago are families, our parents, our mothers, as we've seen lately, recently with, children being enrolled in school in Trinidad and Tobago, public school in Trinidad and Tobago. They just want a better opportunity for themselves. So yes, it's concerning to us based on our national security and the burden on our resources. However, we should also be mindful of the fact that just like every single one of us in Trinidad and Tobago, wanting better opportunities for ourselves and our children, most migrants or migrants, who come here, they look searching for opportunity. That's what they want for themselves and their family.
I recognize and understand what you're saying. However, at this current time, and given what the report details, where TNT finds itself in this current position, do you think that though officially no policies exist, though we are a signatory to the UN Human Rights Convention, as you mentioned, no policy exists, no systems exist. Is it time TNT actually stops allowing the entrance or the free entrance of Venezuelan migrants? And I use the term free entrance in the sense that while I understand our borders are porous and all that, I meant, do you think that at our ports, as best as possible, seaports at least, that needs to be ceased?
Well, I'll go back to the point of laws, right, and enforcement of the laws, because I don't think the government itself is allowing free entry. I think persons who are involved in trafficking activities are facilitating the entry of persons. And if you enforce the laws to crack down on these persons who are allowing, free entry, for lack of a better phrase, and enforce laws, implement laws, you would be able to legally deport persons, also crack down on crime, crack down on the persons that are, accommodating these trafficking. And I think that is key. And right now that is not happening. As I said, we've only had 2 persons to date that have been convicted of trafficking. One has gone missing. We haven't found him yet.
As yet. And whether or not we ever, I guess we're playing hide and seek when it comes to him. don't know what's going on there myself. In that regard, Ms. Pitcher, what is the most appropriate way to respond to this report? I see that though you put forward suggestions of policy and the enforcement of such policy and by extension laws, that takes some time. That is a process that needs to start, and hopefully this just is the ignition that is needed. However, in the interim process, while there are policies and procedures to implement law, what is the best or most appropriate way to actually respond immediately to the content of this report?
Well, I mean, they talk about engagement. There needs to be more engagement. I definitely encourage the government to engage with the international organizations that are working on the ground to respond to the migration situation in Trinidad and Tobago. There needs to be greater engagement and information sharing so that they can respond better. Also, in terms of capacity building, you know, these international organizations provide training, capacity building, information. All of those things would help. Also, in terms of resources as well, too, you know, international organizations like UNHCR, IOM, you know, they're willing to help with, you know, with resources to, you know, support the government to respond to this. But we do have existing laws in place already that we can enforce immediately because the laws exist. It's just that, I guess, would take, you know, political will. But there are things that we can do almost immediately. Apart from stakeholder engagement, is also the enforcement of the laws that we already have.
What do you, in your opinion, I mean, what did you make of the suggestion? It's gathered quite some debate recently about allowing Venezuelan migrants to actually assist the TTPS in its role, whatever capacity it may be, whether it be allowing Venezuelan migrants to become TTPS officers or, you know, again, the capacity in the role. What do you make of that suggestion?
Well, I mean, if they become citizens, you know, they are eligible to apply to, you know, these types of jobs. So I think once they go through the legal process and they become citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, they could be an asset in terms of the language. You know, we should be a bilingual nation by now, given our proximity to Venezuela and given, you know, the number of Spanish speakers we have in Trinidad and Tobago. So that might be a useful endeavor, but of course they would have to go through the process of becoming citizens before they can become eligible for becoming officers.
And of course there isn't a lot happening there as well, even in respect to migrants and the process of migrants to becoming officially recognized as refugees, and then by extension, of course, in the end, applying for citizenship after some time, so naturalization. That process in itself is very slow in TNT.
Yes. To get a residency permit, not just only for Venezuela. Well, I mean, with refugees, it's a little bit different. You know, they have the refugee status, and but then you have migrants that apply for residency permits, and that process takes years. And it's not just Venezuelans; it's even Caribbean nationals who apply for residency permits in Trinidad and Tobago, and the process takes years.
But is that, why is that the case though? Is that because of the scrutiny of the process, or is it just a bureaucracy and bureaucratic red tape?
My assumption is bureaucratic red tape, but I would, you know, encourage you to take that up with Immigration and Ministry of National Security.
If I can get onto them, sure.
Yes, exactly.
Ms. Pitcher, thank you very much for joining me on the program this morning. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for sharing your thoughts and opinions on the report. I 100% agree with you, encouraging others to read the report into the details. It certainly spells out a lot of the reality on the ground. And what it also does is that assumptions that many of us were making, it brings some level of clarity there as well. So thank you very much, Ms. Pitcher, for your time as always.
Thank you so much for having me.
All the very best to you. Take care and keep well. Ladies and gentlemen, human rights advocate Denise Pitcher joining me on AM Prime this morning. Again, I would reiterate, you can go and get a copy of the report online. Simply look for the report, Caribbean Gangs, Drugs, Firearms, and Gang Networks in Jamaica, St. Lucia, Guyana, and TNT. That report being published on September 2nd, just a couple of days ago, speaks to criminal gang operations in its entirety in Trinidad and Tobago, and some of the information that it details is not. It's not going to be necessarily surprising on you. I'm not going to sit here and act as though I'm surprised or I'm taken aback or I gasped when I read it. It really doesn't detail anything that we are unfamiliar with. But what it does is that it also puts you in a position to understand and recognize that this is fact. This is reality. This is not just hearsay anymore. This is not just word of mouth. And it also details how we are feeling. Because as much as we can argue, it might go into detail in respect to laws and policy and that, the mere fact that the report states that we have, I would not like to use the word failed, though it's probably most appropriate, but we have not done our best when it comes to arrest and prosecution of gang members here in TNT. Ms. Pitcher points out that only 2 people have been arrested for human trafficking. 1 has disappeared. We don't even know where he's gone, where he is, or even if he's in Trinidad and Tobago still. Who knows? That's a whole different story. It really speaks to our shortcomings here in TNT, from the authorities in particular, but it also speaks to the fact that how communities have become so close-knit that they may also shield criminal gang networks. Again, not unfamiliar to us, but if this is detailing the reality that we're facing in TNT, I am most curious to see how authorities respond to this. What is next on their agenda when it comes to crime, even if that is on their agenda at all? Because we've had the nicest of words. Minister of National Security, approximately 2 years ago, asked TNT to exercise more patience. I wonder if we still need to be exercising more patience. Ladies and gentlemen, let us take a break here on AM Prime. We will return shortly.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
I want to get a tattoo.
You really want
to me. Respond to me. How you would respond to me?
The first question I'll ask is why?
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say,
services.
we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. So here we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year and early this year.
Oh gosh.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
I read a column recently which started up, about Java. And by the way, I'm wondering if I'm out of it because I really didn't know we adopted this acronym Java. Apparently, it's been around decades. And where have I been? Java, July, August, vacation. I think that's more appropriate than summer vacation. But I read the column and it actually spoke that every Java face the same situation where parents complain about the price of textbooks. In fact, on AM Prime, we had conversations with various bodies across TNT about textbook and pricing, essentially the cost of going back to school. Now, apart from that, have you ever been in a position where, in primary school in particular, because of the situation where students don't necessarily have a timetable or a fixed period for certain classes, they find themselves actually having to take all their textbooks and all their copybooks to school on a daily basis? And even when I was in primary school, the conversation was the effect it's going to have on your child's back, your child's shoulders, the weight. All of that was actually highlighted in a column because it spoke to a simple solution that is already happening across the world. And that is the introduction of e-textbooks. The author of that column is, glad to say, has become a friend of mine. I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Gerald DeMattis to AM Prime once more. Good morning, Dr. DeMattis. Good to see you.
Good morning, Keaton, and good morning to your viewers as well.
Well, thanks for joining us. If it's one thing, we do get a lot of contribution in respect to commentary from your columns. And the latest actually speaks to e-textbooks. It's nothing unfamiliar. I do believe that the previous government administration was examining the possibility of introducing that into Trinidad and Tobago. But as we speak about digital transformation in TNT now, how is e-textbooks a game changer? How is it something that is going to revolutionize the way education is spelled out here in TNT?
I like those terms, game changer, revolutionize, because that's what we're after, right? If we can adopt meaningful changes that can have real impacts on people's lives, not just a certain section of the population, but different people can benefit from this, then we're talking actual meaningful changes. So in terms of how it can be a game changer, we're thinking about benefits to children and families, right? That's what I'm focused on in the column that you mentioned. So privileging that particular section because they are directly impacted by the education that we deliver to them, right? So we have the socioeconomic status affecting families, particularly low-income households, and then children who have to immediately upon the stress of sitting the SCA exam, they now have to adapt to a new environment and new educational demands. So that's my focus, children and families. Now, the Ministry of Education also benefits from this because they're implementing a policy, or they start to implement a policy that can also revolutionize how they provide education and how materials can be used more efficiently and perhaps even more effectively. Now, there are a lot of things to consider in this. Digital transformation is something we just talk about very sophisticated without really examining the nitty-gritty of it. So, and there's a lot of weeds here to be pulling out when we're thinking about e-textbooks. But the important thing really is to start now. So 5 years, if it takes that much, we at least begin to get into those specifics, and gradually we can get to a point where we say, yeah, we've actually revolutionized our educational system, because for a very long time, textbooks have been a problem. Right now, we're talking about the funds allocated to the Ministry of Education and how it's been insufficient, and how there are many upgrades necessary. We see things like rat infestations in certain schools. I recently read a story, they can't account for certain furniture, really bizarre things that really should have been figured out. And we should not have waited until September and the opening of schools to figure that out. So there are many things that the Ministry of Education has to deal with on a rolling basis, and textbooks are certainly one of them that can affect not just the school, but also the families who bear the burden. And thinking about single-parent households, those in particular also stand a great risk when we're thinking about the cost that then trickles down into other areas.
Well, Dr. Demasis, in that regard, we often speak about a digital divide and a digital gap across Tobago, where not only is technology not necessarily affordable for everyone, but the access to technology has become rather difficult. Not everyone in TNT can access Wi-Fi, nor is Wi-Fi available in the area. Or if they do have Wi-Fi, it's not necessarily the connection that has been promised. And that has a role to play in e-textbooks as well, because part of e-textbooks and part of these e-readers, when you have these textbooks downloaded on them, you also have the activities that you get to do as well on them. In that regard as well, does this do anything to bridge that digital divide or digital gap? Even if people have access to these e-readers and that have their textbooks fully downloaded, it does not necessarily mean that they could utilize the e-reader.
Yeah, correct. And that's where we need the digital infrastructure, right? So when we're thinking about the e-textbooks, is everything that goes into that process of producing the e-textbook. So the digital infrastructure is really important, and this is where the Ministry of Education really needs to step up. Like, we need reliable Wi-Fi net connections throughout schools that are password protected, of course, to relieve the burden on internet traffic. So that's a really important strand of this e-textbook transformation that we really need to see happening.
Is it?
Yeah.
Sorry, because you spoke about that. We need to see that happening. That obviously would be the first step before we would consider the introduction of e-textbooks.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the access as well, of course. So the devices. I saw, I think it was, I saw there were donations of certain devices recently to one school. The name eludes me right now, but so that has been happening outside of government capacity. So that there are private donations, and the private sector has an important role to play in this as well. We see the divide. You talk about the digital divide, but we also have the divide in terms of the quote-unquote prestige schools versus the government schools. So we need the private sector to step up as well and facilitate, where as much as possible, that donation of devices or rental system that can perhaps help the government with the distribution of devices that can then ultimately rebound to the benefit of students who can then access these books online. You spoke about, of course, the downloadable factor as well as working offline. Those are also things that need to be sorted out, and it's really just part of that complex system. When you're talking about technology, there's a lot of things to consider, lots of things, and the Ministry of Education, they have a digital transformation policy. It's 2023 to 2027, and we're right in the middle of that. And we might as well be at the start of it. We might as well be in 2023 because there's no real progress, it seems, happening. From that document, it says that the specifically e-textbook platform is in a procurement stage. That might as well say nothing, because we're not really sure exactly what is being procured, how is it being procured, who is being approached. So there's really a dearth of information available to us. And so in terms of the divide, however, you're right. at least the digital infrastructure that can be helped by the Ministry of Education. And from there, we can begin to then say, okay, how do we then maximize the use of this infrastructure? How do we build on it? And how do we use textbooks specifically as a way to revolutionize the access?
Surely as well, e-textbooks would be a lot more cost effective. I mean, the environment factor in having to print books is definitely, it's a no-brainer there. But in respect to the cost of actually having these textbooks available to download, one of the things I'm thinking of is that it's always, you always have to have a credit card if you need to purchase something online. Not everybody necessarily has that. Though we are speaking about a cashless society, we are not necessarily anywhere near achieving that. But the cost overall to parents, this is something that you believe can actually allow for greater equality of education access.
Yeah, and it's weird. I can just use the example of the Ministry of Legal Affairs. So a lot of the payments that you might need to register, say, a business or an organization, you need to actually pay physical cash. You go into the ministry, you pay cash, they give you a voucher number, you then go online, and you then register the payment that way. So the way that the cash payments are even structured, it's meant to mimic an online format. And I think that could be, I mean, as much as that is, let me say, backward, for want of a better word, it is a useful model in terms of introducing those who do not have, as you say, access to a credit card, because that's something we take for granted. Even going to a bank physically is stressful, but there is a mechanism for bank transfers online. So there are little things that we can work around in terms of those digital payments, but certainly that is a limitation. And the greatest, I suppose the greatest consequence of when we're thinking ebook transformation is to widen that gap. And I think we need to be really careful, and that's why it demands a really strategic perspective and path, that the way that we implement e-textbooks does not widen the already wide gap between those who can afford it and those who cannot. And so when we talk about digital transformation, really, and in 2022, the Minister of Digital Transformation, Hasselbach, has talked about we're on track for it by 2025. Well, we're really not, if we're thinking about these very specific groups of people who do not have access and who can't afford certain things. So it really begins with those people who need the support the most, and then working from there.
So as we are examining pros and cons this morning, one of the cons that I can think of, I mean, you studied English and you studied literature in English, and correct me if I'm wrong in that regard, but even as a columnist, it speaks to the benefit of being able, to read, being able to have that book in front of you. Are we actually sacrificing a lot when it comes to e-readers or e-textbooks? Because the engagement with a book in front of you, having to actually read, having to actually write, utilize these textbooks and activity books, you write in them as compared to e-reader, you're just using your fingers. Are we actually sacrificing too much when it comes to the standards of English and by extension the standards of grammar if we are moving with a suggestion of e-textbooks?
In short, no. And you reference, you really good, well to point out that, I studied literature and, I wrote my first book, and, so I have a real stake in this in terms of authorship and royalties that might be gained from that. But let's just take the technology for a moment. It was said that when ChatGPT burst onto the scene in November 2022, there was a lot of fear and anxiety about it, and someone said, listen, the real consequence is not it's not those who have the technology and those who don't, but those who can use the technology. versus who don't. And that's a really different way to think about it. How we use the technology is going to determine the success, not if we just disregard it completely. And this is important when we think about the fact that the technology is not going away. So it's in fact, it's going to become more advanced, more sophisticated, and more people are going to be forced into using it. So the best scenario is actually to begin using it and to begin adapting to it. And on the point of the book, that's well taken. I recently watched a program, and it was it's not in Trinidad, but these very small independent bookstores cropping up in the US, very small circles. And actually what you find is, because there's so much that drive towards technology, there's actually a nostalgia for the very traditional form. So some people will actually, because of that nostalgia, they will still want that, in this case, a book. They still want to hold the book and turn the pages and smell the book. And you know, books are experiences essentially, right? So there's still going to be people who want that book experience, and there will be people who will need to adapt to technology just because it's going to be ubiquitous. I see this technology as serving the drive towards ebook technology and transformation as serving both, in the sense that it's going to, on the one hand, increase the demand for physical books because people want that nostalgia, and is going to motivate people to use technology because they don't want to be left behind. So yes, there are consequences, but it's how we think about it, right? Do we actually, are we going to wield the technology and not let it get away from us? Or are we actually going to say, well, you know what, I should probably learn to use it because I don't want to be left behind? So maybe it's a mindset thing as well.
I hear you. I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you, but the reality is, particularly in Trinidad, we still have a large part of our population, and I'm not just talking about school children now, I'm speaking about adults as well, who simply find it difficult to read or write. So we have institutions like Alta, who is really trying to assist in that regard. Now, it's very difficult to argue in respect to reading, because with an e-reader, it's exactly what it is. It's a book in front of you, simply not that paper-based book, but rather an e-book, a digital book that you simply scroll through. I understand that, so it's not necessarily going to do a lot of damage there, but surely in respect to writing skills and the ability and penmanship and all of that, which by the way is still very important when we speak about the working world, you know, isn't that something that, again, that we need to be very careful, as much as we're pushing e-textbooks, and there are a lot of pros to it, that we also need to probably be careful of social engagement, social interaction, and that sort of interaction within the classroom. We need to be careful that we're not cutting that out, and that it is also going to lead to further problems down the line. Like I mentioned, the ability to write.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And that's where the curriculum needs to be balanced. It needs to be sufficiently balanced. It needs to say, and it needs to be adaptable as well. It says, okay, if we're going to actually we're going to allow students to use their devices in a way that facilitates the learning process, then we need to balance that with more instruction in penmanship, let's just say, or actual physical creative writing, to ensure that they never lose that sense of that sort of tactical, the experience with the actual page and the pen. So I think in that case, maybe we also need to consider the adaptability of the curriculum to allow for that balance between an increasing turn towards technology while retaining the very traditional things that we've grown up with, that we found useful. Because writing on a piece of paper is very different to writing on a computer, and we absorb information differently. There are also different physiological factors maybe a blue light screen, a light emitter is much too stressful on children's eyes, which I absolutely would accept. So this is just another factor that we need to also take into account if we're thinking about increasingly moving towards e-textbooks and essentially introducing more screens into children's lives.
So, Dr. Demartis, we've examined affordability, we've examined accessibility, we've really looked at some pros and cons, we've even examined to a certain extent ease of use. With that being said, you spoke to digital transformation and the digital divide in TNT. Given all that, and given that even the Ministry of Education is still in a procurement process, or they're still really working very hard to implement the goals of their digital transformation policy, how soon do you think that e-textbooks can become a reality in TNT?
Wow. How soon? This is difficult because right now I can't see it happening. That's my answer. Right now I cannot see it happening, and probably for about 2 more years. I think that there are way too many things to sort out, and just the fact that a lot of the things move very slowly, I can't see it realistically happening in the next couple of years. Also, the fact that I reached out to the Minister of Education and the Corporate Communications Officer just for a simple answer, what is the status of this? And no one could give me an answer. Let me just say, by the way, because this peeves me, I'm going to make a slight detour. Ministry of Education, ministers need to be accountable to the people. That's what you're put there for. And that's part of the social contract when you're elected and when you're appointed. And part of that requires you to answer questions. As hard as that pill might seem to swallow.
We can't even get them for an interview, Dr. Demartis.
Right? We need those questions answered. It's not even the least that you can do. It's what you need to do. So that's the first thing. I wish I could give you an answer because that answer would come from the ministry, right? Depending on what stage they're in, I can say, yeah, this looks likely in the next 2 years, or it does not. All I can say right now, and again, going back to that digital transformation policy plan, the endpoint at which is 2027, and they want to achieve all these lovely things, e-textbooks being just one of them, right? Just one of them. And we've talked about so many different issues related to accessibility and affordability, and also just things about the technophobia that is part of the entire society, not just schools. Given all of those things, I do not realistically see an e-textbook platform solution being rolled out within the next 2 years. Perhaps, maybe within 5 years, I think that's more realistic. But there's still things that we can do to get to that point, right? Like we're thinking about e-textbooks as the end point, and therefore there are many different things we can that we can do to lead up to that point. And we talked about it already. The digital infrastructure is one of them. Thinking about how to balance the curriculum, we need education officers who can begin to brainstorm. Okay, if we're in this situation with e-textbooks, what would a curriculum look like? What would an adaptable curriculum look like that still retains the essential elements of education while accounting for changes in technology? We've talked about the accessibility and affordability. So while we're working towards that endpoint of e-textbooks, there's still things we can implement in that build-up to ensure that when it is realizable, we can actually it is supported, and it's not just we're not figuring everything out at the same time.
Well, I'll tell you what, you are not sure if it's going to happen anytime soon, not even within the next 2 years, maybe 5 years. And based off of the response that you get from officials, including the Minister of Education, I don't think they see it happening anytime soon. So, let's not hold our breaths. Dr. Demartis, once more, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Thank you for your presence, and thank you for your contribution to the national discussions. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Keaton, and thank you to everyone. Have a good day.
You too. All the best. Take care. Dr. Gerald Martins joining us on the program this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, I would encourage you to read his contributions. It's always available online. Let's promote the e-reading. You can do it you can go online, and you just simply have to search for Dr. Gerald Martins, and his columns appear immediately. Let's take a break here on the program. We will return where the conversations will continue. Stay with us.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
Here is your WESN News on the Hour. I'm Naomi Maknish. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Hospital employee killed near workplace. 4 injured in separate shootings in Barataria and Pleasantville. Bomb threat targets Guyana Airport, NORCAL, and internationally, U.S. Navy sailor detained in Venezuela. Now for the details. An employee of the St. James Medical Complex was shot and killed near his workplace on Wednesday. He was identified as Jamal Watts of Belmont. The shooting happened at around 10:30 a.m. Police said Watts was cutting grass in a field near the hospital when he was ambushed and shot multiple times. The 33-year-old man was taken to the hospital's accident and emergency department where he was pronounced dead. The area was cordoned off and vehicles were prevented from entering the compound as crime scene investigators were at the scene. Police are investigating 2 separate shooting incidents in Barataria and Pleasantville, which left a total of 4 people injured. In the first incident around 6 a.m. Wednesday morning, residents of Upper 6th Avenue in the vicinity of 4th Street heard a series of loud explosions. Upon investigating, they found a man lying on the roadway in a pool of blood. The police and paramedics were notified. Officers from the Northeastern Division responded and conveyed the injured man to the Eric Williams Medical Sciences Complex. His condition is said to be serious. Up to 8 a.m., crime scene investigators were still on the scene with at least a dozen spent shells being observed by investigators. Police currently have no motive for the shooting. In a separate incident, police said a 17-year-old teenager was among 3 others who were shot Tuesday night in Pleasantville. The victims, ages 17, 18, and 19, were lying along Catalina Drive around 8:20 p.m. when they were confronted by a man known to them. The suspect had been observed jumping a nearby wall before running up to the trio. Without warning, he opened fire on the group. Police said the 18-year-old was shot in the right butt cheek, the 17-year-old was shot in the upper left leg, and the 19-year-old was shot in his lower left leg. The suspect then fled the scene on foot. Relatives in the area notified the police and emergency health services, and the injured teenagers were all taken to the San Fernando General Hospital. A team of officers from the Monterey Post Police Station responded and are continuing inquiries. Caribbean Airlines confirmed that a bomb threat was received at its Trinidad call center on September 1st, but the threat was not directed at the airline itself. The threat involved the Chedi Jagan International Airport in Guyana, where a man claimed a life and death situation could occur. Guyanese authorities are investigating, tracing the call back to Guyana. The caller, who said he was once part of a group planning the incident, warned the authorities but refused to provide further details. This comes shortly after a similar threat was made against a Georgetown hotel, which was later deemed a prank. Internationally, a U.S. Navy sailor has been detained in Venezuela after traveling there without authorization, according to the Pentagon. The sailor was taken into custody by Venezuelan authorities around August 30th. Pentagon officials say they are working closely with the State Department to resolve the situation. The sailor was not on official duty or authorized leave at the time of the incident. This follows a similar case earlier this year involving a U.S. Army soldier detained in Russia. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi McNish. Thanks for watching.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing at wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.
Since we're examining pros and cons, the cons of not necessarily being in studio is that I miss out when Joash makes his Hongwing, and it seems as though Joash has had quite a bit of his Hongwing this morning. Well done to you, my friend. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us as we continue with this edition of AM Prime. We've had some rather interesting conversations thus far. The first actually focused on Venezuelan migrants in TNT and that UN report on Venezuelan gangs. The second, of course, focused on e-textbooks, and this last one actually focuses on both. It uses very well because in the first conversation, Mr. Denise Pritchard spoke to TNT being a bilingual society. Now, we are not officially a bilingual state, but how we reach that point where we can consider ourselves a bilingual society, should we make the steps to becoming a bilingual state, exactly what is required if we are to take that approach, and how do we find ourselves adjusting for that particular cultural shift? How are we working towards accommodating that cultural shift? Well, I'm joined this morning by Miss Amanda Crespo. She is the founder of the Spanish Cafe TNT, and I am not speaking about quite literally the cafe as you know about it. Miss Crespo is with us virtually. Good morning, Miss Crespo. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. Buenos dias.
Good morning.
Thanks for having me on this morning.
How are you? How are you doing?
I love the hot topic. This is my area. I love this topic because I am just, it's just so necessary.
Well, then where do we even begin? I mean, in your opinion, could we already consider ourselves a bilingual society?
The thing is that we are very far from being a bilingual society, except for the community that came over here, right? So the immigrant community, some of them, because they came over when they were younger, they are called natural bilinguals. That means, you have no choice but to learn the language. You came over here at a young age and you already speak Spanish. The rest of us, though, we are in some trouble. The majority of the country is not really bilingual, and we would see it in a lot of situations that are really crucial, like any hospital where somebody has an accident and their life is on the line and people are doing sign language. They're like pointing and so we have a lot of situations where it's really obvious that we are not bilingual at all. We have little sprinkles here and there, and I think it could be partially because some people think that doesn't concern me. that community is that community, and we are Trinis or Trinbagonians, you know? But it's not true. It's going to roll over in every aspect of life, right?
Yeah, well, the thing is, we are Trinis, we are Trinbagonian, but what Trinis, what has made up Trinbago so sweet and so beautiful is the fact that we've been so diverse. And what is that? So, you know, speaking about the influx of Venezuelan migrants since 2015, approximately 60,000 have entered TNT. The conversation, the narrative now focuses on that. And, you know, within the last few years, we've been pushing to do a lot more business as well with Venezuela. So, given all that into consideration and the direction in which TNT is moving forward, you know, is this an approach that needs to be taken seriously? The interaction, the business, and now we need to actually consider speaking this as a second language.
So I believe because we are in a new reality, it's something that's a little more crucial than the country may realize. It's really because every single aspect, issues of security and crime, issues of education, or medical care system, everything is going to be affected by this, and the numbers are rising, right? It's not just the Venezuelan community, we have Dominican Republic, Cuba, Colombia. We have a growing Spanish-speaking community. So what happens if they don't integrate? Well, kind of what's happening now, but it's not. It's not the ideal. Imagine going to a police station with a report and one of the people are Spanish speaking and they can't figure out what just happened, and they look around at the police station and nobody's speaking Spanish. So you pull out Google, but the thing is, it's urgent. We need to get it going now. We have to answer the questions now. This is a life and death situation, or maybe there's an issue of a murder or something, and that is what is going on right now, where in many places it's chaos. So a lot of the things that keep this society running are not running properly now, because it's no longer maybe one day I might bounce up one Spanish-speaking person, right? I'm sure you have. Like, everywhere you go, you'll see that community they're all over. So it's no longer a matter of, well, it doesn't affect me. It's so, I see it as really, 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 really urgent. Because I guess I have the reminders all the time, especially as a Spanish teacher, and then somebody always wants me, oh my gosh, someone is in front of my house and this is happening. Can you translate? Can you translate? Can you translate? Yeah. So it's a bit of, we're losing our independence, including, the leadership. Imagine being in a situation in the country and you're in a leadership role. Yeah, you're a minister or something. And it's almost like you're kind of handicapped. You're in a situation and you can't respond to people who pertain to your country. I mean, this concerns us now. You are part of our community now. And, for the most part, I think that you're here to stay, so it's important that we integrate, in my opinion.
In that regard, then, how easy is this transition going to be? Not everyone, let's be quite honest. The majority of people, once they exit the education schooling system in TNT, they don't necessarily care to do anything other. We're not going to learn anything else. So then, in terms of preparing for or accommodating this shift, what is it going to take? What are the necessities that needs to be applied?
Well, that's a pretty it's a pretty complex question, but I'll do my best to simplify it. It will have to start with mindset. It will have to start with the country on the whole, starting from the parents of the children, right? Thinking it is important enough to do. Because if you think something isn't worth the investment, and as a Spanish teacher, I'm telling you, Spanish will take some effort, yeah? So it would start off with having a mindset of, if we don't do this, we'll be left behind. Because what's going to happen, which is happening already, is that the Latin community, they are going to be bilingual anyway, right? So the younger generation that has come here, they are speaking, they're speaking English by force. And then the rest of us are not going to be, it's called natural bilingual, right? So it means you naturally go into this. You don't have to be forced to speak Spanish, do you, right? But they're going to feel like they have to do it to function in Trinidad. So they'll get opportunities for jobs. They'll be the preferred ones and stuff in terms of lots of situations. And we will just be here. The country will be, we don't know, like it's actually something to to think about, but a lot of people don't think it's that important. They think, oh, well, that's all right, that those young people could do that. So if some of the older generation, I won't even say older, if only Gen Zs are taking it seriously, right? Where they're like, look, we have to learn Spanish because this is coming and we have to keep up with the time. That's going to be a big holdback. And the second thing is definitely, we want to institutionalize it, like make it part of our school system from young, right? But it means that once again, the teachers will have to be equipped in a way to teach that way. Because the way that we teach right now doesn't cause anybody to be bilingual, actually, because most people who leave secondary school, most of them don't speak Spanish when they do CSEC, right? It's not really communicative Spanish at the core. It's not really. Most of them, if you talk to them, it's say a couple of things, but it's different from the systems like in Canada and the States and stuff.
That's very interesting. That language that is being taught, or how it is being taught and applied, it's not communicative.
Yeah, it is interesting.
Could you explain that a bit more?
Well, the way it's taught isn't focusing particularly on oral proficiency, meaning the way you speak. So, a lot of people say, I understand Spanish, but I can't say much. So that's the area I focus on a lot, right? Meaning, if you've done a course or you've studied Spanish even for a year, 2 years, if you finish speaking it and you can't say anything, that kind of sucks. You don't want to really be having a conversation with your phone doing Google Translate because you still can't put the sentences together. You can't form dialogue. And that is the case for a lot of people. So like a lot of the people that come to my courses would say, I've done Spanish, but I just don't actually speak it. The way it's taught, language is not something that you just automatically, even if you're a really good teacher, if you're not taught certain techniques so I would say the mainstream way a lot of Spanish is taught in Trinidad in the school system is not really ideal for you to be very communicative. It's more for the exam, CSEC, writing the essays, and right? So when you're finished, you can write a nice paragraph, but you might not be able to answer Pablo when he come outside in an emergency. You're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to say, right? So, but it's possible to do because I see they've done it in Canada and United States, meaning the style of teaching that the government implements, which is totally different than what we have here, makes the students a lot more proficient and they can actually have conversation. And it wouldn't be hard to do because we have community to practice with, right? Not some kind of far-fetched thing.
Again, it goes back to the point that we're teaching students to just pass an exam, not necessarily apply it in life. Ms. Crespo, how do you respond to those who have suggested, and when I say those, I mean this is the man on the ground, the everyday working man. This is not necessarily something we've heard from those in authority or those who hold certain roles or positions. This is, other people who I meet, other people I talk to, and there seems to be this attitude that, well, these individuals are coming to my country and we speak English. They should be the ones learning English, not me learning Spanish.
Yeah, it's tough. Because that's a really big narrative, right? I actually I held up a sign, like a protest. It wasn't a real protest, of course. It was for my social media, and it was about, it was telling people, stop saying no problemo. No problemo doesn't exist in Spanish, right? So I had, it was just to get people a little aware of how we say certain things in Trinidad that don't exist anywhere, right? It's not Spanish. And while it went well, there were some people who said in the comments, why should I learn any Spanish? This is my country and I speak English, right? They should speak English as well. The thing is, if you say that, you're just sitting down in denial. You are in a new reality. Whether or not you like it, you are going to be surrounded by a community. The community is growing, and it is, if you are left out of the community, you're left out of everything that is to offer. There's business opportunities, social situations. So if you say that, it's probably a bit of a blind spot. You haven't come to understand that you don't have a choice in the matter. You are no longer in a country where English is the main thing spoken all the time. You can go into a community. There are some restaurants, there are some churches, there was even a baseball game. There are baseball games, big baseball games. Everybody there is speaking Spanish. They are Venezuelans. Yeah, baseball game. And guess what? You will be the outsider. So unless you want to be an outsider within your country, you have to come onto that mindset, you know. I think it's even in numbers, it's not something that people are totally aware of. Because, you know, a lot of people are not documented. So it's easy to be a little bit delusional about how big this community is. It's a lot bigger than the people who say that think, you know. So, yeah.
Now, in that regard, do you think, again, we understand that we are not a bilingual society, not necessarily because, for want of a better, there is a lack of effort. The opportunity exists because they have institutions such as the Spanish Cafe that have allowed for people to be welcome and listen. We can help you, we're going to assist you, we can teach you. And apart from that, you know, as you mentioned, it's an attitude and a mindset. It's, you know, we spoke about willingness, but it's the attitude and mindset as well. So we're not a bilingual society, but we certainly have everything in front of us that could allow us to become a bilingual society.
Definitely.
So, a very, very basic question for people wondering. You mentioned that, you know, Spanish is not necessarily the easiest thing to learn. And people would argue English is not necessarily the easiest thing to do. English is one of the most complex and difficult languages. In that regard, is there a way that we can make, you know, learning Spanish a bit more easier, a bit more, you know, less burdensome on some people, open up their mindset a bit more?
Well, that's one of the best questions I've ever heard in my life. So that is what Spanish Cafe was founded on, right? Making the experience so enjoyable that you want to do it. You know, our school system is one where, you know, back in the day it was a blackboard and some chalk, and you know, you just start there and your learning style didn't really matter. Some people learn better by listening, auditory, right? Some people are more visual, some people are kinesthetic, like their hands have to get involved. And because the learning style may be a little bit limited in terms of our culture and our background in the school system, yeah, there are so many amazing ways you could make Spanish extremely exciting, vibrant, broken down, simplified, so that it's not overwhelming. You know, there are many, many ways that can be done. That's something that my dad is a teacher named Mr. Crespo, and he, oh my gosh, he has like really, really mastered the art of simplifying it, where people would say, I did not know I could do this, or, you know, and so that is how it is for me now as well, the enjoyment of adults saying, I thought I sucked at Spanish, but I don't, you know. Yeah, so it would be great if they could make that a national thing and change the mindsets of just the system and the teachers to be like, okay, guys, we want to make this something that people feel encouraged to do, and not just kids, right? Adults, right? I work with adults a lot. Adults tend to feel a little intimidated to say something wrong, to say wrong accent or whichever. But if you have the right approach, people will be a lot more willing to make the effort, you know? So the right approach and the right mindset. It's going to take a little shift, a little time. But I think that people are, as I said, I can't think of anywhere I could go that I would, like any mall, be like, I know this mall has no Spanish speakers. Or I know this, you know, or a stretch of Port of Spain, I'd be like, nobody on this stretch of Port of Spain is speaking Spanish. Like, it's just not possible anymore. Like, it's everywhere, you know? Yeah.
And, okay, so let's speak about technology as well. We can't have this conversation without speaking about technology. There will be those who say, I'm not even going to bother. I can simply pull up my phone, go on the internet. There are apps that are available for this. I can type in and get translations. I can speak and get translations. Why even bother and go through all that effort? I'm just going to utilize this device that I've paid thousands of dollars for and just use translation.
Well, there's a measure of independence you have if you don't need a device, number one, because you wouldn't want to be on a date and then your phone shuts down and you all sit down quietly. You would want a measure of independence that even if your phone is not around, that you're not sounding like Boo Boo the Clown. You want to sound like you know something and say it, right? So I would say one, yeah, technology is awesome with it, but it does still, I mean, I think eventually it is going to get to that place. I don't know because I haven't seen it in terms of translation that's available right now. There is nothing that's totally translating accurately. And sometimes if you translate something wrongly, like it sounds so ridiculous. Like if you know somebody, because I mean, sometimes my students would send me things on Google Translate, and I'd be like, okay, you went to Google for this, didn't you? Yeah, this is what you just said, right? So you don't always say what you hope to say, or you might just say the wrong tone. So the humans, we can tell tones, right? So if I say, oh gosh, his brother dead. Now I know dead isn't correct, right? He dead versus he passed away. Passed away and dead don't sound the same to us, yeah? So there are quite a few examples like that where you say something, but you don't know how it's sounding in the other person's language because you just read what some, robots or something told you, and now you totally messed it up, And there's an example, a really popular example, the word excited. If you translate it online, excited, right, meaning a word in Spanish, so there's two words, excitado and emocionado. Well, excitado sounds more like excited, right? So of course you're going to pick that one. But guess what? That's not the excited you wanted to talk about. That one is the bedroom excited. Yeah. Could you imagine? You're like, oh, I'm so excited to see you. And you're talking to somebody and they're like, okay, take it down. Take it all the way down. What are you doing? Right? Because you didn't know the tone. You didn't know the nuance. You just went online, got a translation, went with it, and you didn't understand that even though Google says this, it means something else. Like it has an undertone. So I think we have a little way to go with the translation online. It's a little risky. Yeah.
I'm trying to keep a straight face for this.
It's not foolproof, right? It's useful, but it can't replace.
Yeah, it's also every secondary school student's worst nightmare when the teacher realizes that, hold on, you use translate. Oh, okay, all right, cool. We'll go and do this. I'm not speaking from experience. But, Ms. Crespo, I mean, as you mentioned at the start of the conversation, it's something that we need to take a lot more seriously. It doesn't only, it's not only because of what is happening in TNT in respect to a cultural and social shift, but also in respect to we're moving forward. We don't want to be left behind. This is going to help with national services. This is going to help in a hospital, in a police station. This can help with somebody on the roadway who is lost and needs some sort of help or direction. So clearly, of course, this is something that needs to be taken a lot more seriously. So my final question to you this morning is, what do we need to do? Besides change my attitude, we've started the conversation. What do I need to do next?
What do you need to do next? That's a great question. I think there's a lot of resources now. I think things shouldn't be limited to if you could come to like Spanish cafe courses or anything like that, right? It's nice to have free resources, and the thing is that in the day and age we're in, there are lots of resources online. There are free apps. Everybody knows Duolingo, but there's a lot more available for people if you are interested. Yeah. So what you need to do is use your fingers and start researching, how can I learn Spanish in case you don't have the budget right now to learn Spanish here. And you know what's really a big motivator? Choosing to integrate into the community. Make friends with somebody. You see somebody by the mall, every time you go to a store or something, you smile. You make a little conversation, you say a little 2 lines. Because when you have the motivation of community, like, let's say you made a friend in the mall, and next time you want to say something longer than Buenos Dias, you want to actually have a sentence now. So you go home now and you're motivated to use it. So I think that because we have the opportunity with people around us, like it's not a theoretical thing. Spanish isn't some far-fetched thing for us. Spanish is here. People should be taking a step now that when they see somebody, even if they're not in the community, meaning integrated, make a friend, talk to somebody, get involved, and make use of the free apps. Even if you're not already placed and you want to invest in an official course, there are so many apps or things you could use that are for free. There's one called Hello Talk as well. So that's what I think. I think people should start with baby steps, and start connecting with the culture on a deeper level. Start finding out a little bit about the music. Start, find a way that it wouldn't be such an alienated concept. Something that you could connect with in real life, not just a theory that, one day I might bounce up somebody. No, you might nothing. You will have some interaction where somebody is speaking Spanish. And you'll wish that you started something. Yeah.
Yes, and stop relying on Translate. At least we got some examples this morning as to why you need to. Miss Crespo, thank you very much for joining me on the program this morning. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
What I could really appreciate is that a very serious topic and something that we need to take seriously, and I like how you approach the conversation. You've made it a lot more comfortable for a lot of people who are viewing and thinking, and are very fearful because they don't know where to begin or they're too scared to start because it's a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, all the best. Miss Amanda Crespo, yes, I'm one of those who I studied Spanish. At the university. I mean, when I was studying school, I did Spanish as a course, and believe you me, I have not applied it properly. I am admitting that on national television, ladies and gentlemen. You shouldn't be ashamed. You really shouldn't be ashamed.
Lovely confessional.
It's the first step, right? Admitting it is the first step, right, to resolving it, right? So, this conversation was for me as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for AM Prime. Thank you very much for joining me on the program this morning, and thank you to all my guests. We get to close the show with Miss Crespo this morning. Miss Crespo, you are the first guest on AM Prime who can say goodbye to TNT. You are closing up the show this morning. Tell everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, today is a good day to have a good day, and we'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye.
WESN.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing at wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.
For that, because Emmanuel Macron is a lame duck. He cannot be re-elected. He lost the election. He wants someone who will be there, maybe not too much of a challenger, but Michel Barnier is maybe not so well known, but he's an experienced politician. He's old enough to make sure that he will be able to get some wiggle room to be able to be a real prime minister and not someone who pretends to be prime minister.
We have reactions coming in thick and fast to the appointment of Michel Barnier as France's new prime minister. Unsurprisingly, Mark, we have the France Unbowed party saying that the decision does not respect the sovereignty and the recent vote. We can go across to France 24's Claire Paquelin standing by outside the Élysée Palace. Claire, a lot of reactions, I assume, coming in?
Certainly, the suspense is finally over. I can tell you this week has been a bit of a roller coaster as we've had various different names coming through, swirling around. We had Bernard Cazeneuve, the former socialist prime minister, Xavier Bertrand, a big figure on the right, David Lisnard, who was a right-wing figure as well, mayor of the city of Cannes in the south of France. We also had the possibility of a technocrat from civil society, Thierry Baudet. All these different names have come up and down, but what we do know now is that Michel Barnier had dinner with Emmanuel Macron last night, and he has now just been named as the next Prime Minister of France. Of course, his task will be getting the support of Parliament. We have just heard from Jordan Bardella of the far-right National Rally Party saying that he and his supporters will be listening hard to the speech that Michel Barnier will make. The first speech he makes as Prime Minister, well, he will lay out his proposals and he will be listening carefully. So that's not saying that he plans immediately to vote against him in any future vote of no confidence. It looks like the National Rally is going to take its time on that, at least are willing to hear what Michel Barnier plans to do. But of course we are expecting very strong attacks from the left wing on this, because Michel Barnier is a right-wing politician. He's a member of the Les Républicains party, the traditional right here in France. The left, that left-wing alliance, the New Popular Front, says that it won the parliamentary elections. It won the most seats back in July, but it fell some 100 seats of getting an overall majority. So we are expecting more of this roller coaster to continue here in France and the French political scene. But for now, what I can tell you, the suspense is over. Michel Barnier, 73-year-old, now the next Prime Minister of France.
The suspense may be over, but the drama will continue in France, won't it, Claire? Claire, thank you very much for that. I'd like to bring in our European Affairs editor, Armin Georgian. Armin, so tell us a little more about Michel Barnier's views on Europe. Of course, we know he's a very fluent English speaker. What are his views on Europe?
Well, I think the key thing to bear in mind is he really knows Europe from both sides, in the sense that he was a European Commissioner twice, but he's also been in the French government, including as France's Minister for European Affairs. In the late 1990s, he was also a member of the European Parliament. So he has really, I suppose, from a kind of classic French trajectory, a kind of impeccable European CV, and we mentioned his years as Brexit negotiator as well. And just to underline what Mark was saying a bit earlier about the budget, this is actually a big issue because France is at the moment under an excessive deficit procedure, so it's under surveillance by the European Commission, and it's got to present a plan by the 20th of September. We don't know if the French government is going to meet that deadline or not, but we know that Michel Barnier is quite conservative on these matters. I was just rereading an interview that he gave on France's budget situation when he himself was the European Commissioner, so a few years back when he was Commissioner for the Internal Market, and he said at the time it would be irresponsible for France to get into more debt, and that France needs to find financial stability and then focus on growth and investment. So probably this is the kind of line that he would take now, and to say that getting this budget deficit under control is probably the absolute priority, rather than spending more money. And in that sense, this is where President Macron wants to go in the last, I guess, couple of years of this presidency.
Mark, Emmanuel Macron dragged his feet with naming this new prime minister nearly 2 months after that snap election. Given that the public's patience has worn so thin, do you think that's an added pressure on the left to get its act in order and just sit on its hands and bite its tongue? Or do you don't think that's likely, that strategy is likely to work?
Well, obviously there'll be, lots of shouts, as I said previously, on the left, that the election has been stolen. That election, essentially, they won the elections, even though they only won a very relative majority. But it's true they had the biggest bloc.
That's exactly what Jean-Luc Mélenchon has said. It has been stolen.
Exactly. So, I read his mind, but it's not so difficult, to be honest. And they had already said that there should be a popular mobilization on September the 7th with the union and so on. So, yes, obviously, this is going to be the motto. And they said, we've presented our candidate, and the logic, and it's true, there is some truth to it, would be Emmanuel Macron. And some even in Emmanuel Macron said he made a mistake. He should have said, okay, try getting a majority. They probably wouldn't have obtained that majority. And then he could have said, okay, like in many other parliamentary democracies, well, you didn't, cobble together a majority. Let's hand the baton to another group, and they can have a shot. But he decided not to do so because he felt that it was his prerogative to really make sure that he would choose a prime minister that would get at least implicit or tacit support in Parliament. And so this is why he came up with Michel Barnier and not someone from the left.
You wanted to say something?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely right. And the fact that Macron didn't do that, he didn't give the New Popular Front a shot, it's leading to this kind of constant chorus of people saying that Macron is, not behaving democratically, that for him to continue his agenda is more important than actually, giving people a chance who voted for the left in the election, and that somehow he's, overriding, these kind of very basic principles, right? So that's perhaps a bit of a problem for Macron going forward now.
The far left, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, calling for mass protests on the 7th of September following news that Emmanuel Macron has chosen Michel Barnier as the country's next Prime Minister. Gentlemen, thank you very much for that. Time next for French Connections. Time now for French Connections, our weekly look at the intricacies of life here in France. This week, we're going to focus on French politics and how the actual institutions work in the wake of snap parliamentary elections called in June. President Emmanuel Macron has taken his time naming a prime minister, so let's take a closer look with what the respective roles of the president and the prime minister are here in France. And does the French president have too much power? Flo?
Hey, Delano. Well, let's dive right in with our word du jour, which is a word that comes up when you talk about executive power here in France. A great word for you Scrabble buffs out there. It's bicéphalisme. So bicéphale means two-headed. So you get the idea. In France, the executive is a two-headed monster. So on the one hand, you have the president, directly elected by the French people. And on the other hand, you have the prime minister, who is named by the president and responsible in front of the parliament. Now, the relationship between the president and the prime minister is regulated by the French Constitution, Articles 5, 15, 20, and 21. There is some plasticity, though, in this relationship, in the Constitution, so it does give a little bit of wiggle room to the players involved.
Let's start with the role of the president, Florence, because the French presidency is unique, immensely powerful as an institution. In fact, some experts say it's the most powerful office in the democratic world.
That's right. French presidents have more power than leaders in other countries like Germany, the UK, and the United States, at the scale of France. Keep that in mind, at the scale of France. So first of all, the French president is the head of state and in charge of ensuring that the French Constitution is upheld. The French president is also the person who sets the nation's policy agenda and represents France abroad on the world stage. The French president is also commander-in-chief. You can see all the French presidents of the Fifth